Talk about confidence. Dabo Swinney just made the boldest of predictions for the Clemson Tigers in 2025. Let's assemble the squad.
You're talking ball with the ACC squad, sponsored by Game Time. From Florida State to North Carolina, from Syracuse to Miami, and from NC State to California, it's the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you scoops, breakdowns, and the most comprehensive preview of the upcoming ACC weekend. Hang on, it could get loud, it could get heated, and it will definitely be fun. Squad up, you're part of the ACC squad.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making the ACC squad your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this edition of the squad, we've got the first batch of coaches poll rankings out. Did they do the ACC right? Spoiler alert, no, they didn't. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about sleepers who have a chance to win the conference in football this year. A team that is not a sleeper is the Clemson Tigers. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. We got Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse. We got J.J. Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. Talk about confident guys. Dabo Swinney said this week, quote, "We were the first 15-0 team in the history of major college football, and I think we're going to be the first 16-0 team this year. It's a race to do that." And yeah, Clemson back in 2018, early college football playoff days, were the first to ever go 15-0. Do they have, Jackson, I'll let you buy the first round, is Clemson, we know they're good, but are they good enough to be the first 16-0 team in history?
Oh, goodness. That's can they go 1-0 first? I mean, they're starting off with LSU. That ain't exactly a pushover here. I mean, let's see what you do against LSU, and then we can really start talking about whether or not they're going to go 16-0 or not. But I'm not surprised that Dabo Swinney would say that. I mean, he's a head coach of a really excellent team that's the favorite for good reason to win the ACC and go to the college football playoff, and they have legitimate national title aspirations. It's not out of the realm of possibility to suggest they're going to go 16-0, especially if you're a Clemson fan. You're thinking they're going to go probably 16-0. I don't think so. That is incredibly hard to do. I think they're going to stumble one or two times in the regular season, but that's not to take anything away from them. I just think 16-0, that's hard. I don't think they got that in them.
I think it's so hard to do, to your point, Jackson, when you factor in those games that they've got outside of their ACC schedule, with LSU being a lot of people's kind of sleeper pick, so to speak, in the SEC, another year of Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. And then the games that they've been having over the last several years against Shane Beamer's versions of the South Carolina Gamecocks, they can't count that one as an automatic win like they were able to for several years there under Dabo Swinney. But what I like is this. I mean, Dabo's got his fastball back, right? Because it feels like there were a couple of years lately where these weren't the comments that he was making, and Dabo was finding every single reason and every single thing in the sport to complain about outside of his team. So if all of a sudden he's pivoted, he's always got these comparisons to the great pastor that you go listen to preach every single Sunday. We haven't been hearing the high praises of his football teams over the last few seasons, and we clearly can't deny the success that he's had as a football coach. So if he's seeing something, I kind of want to start to believe it a little bit, guys. And let's remember, it is the ACC. This isn't an SEC schedule that Clemson is going to have to climb their way through.
And to your point, JJ, I was going to add on to this. He's saying the right things.
Yeah.
And the mentality is correct. If you're a coach in Division I football, your mindset should be, we're going to win every single game and we're going to win the national championship, because that's the goal. That's the dream goal at the end of the day. It's like if you're studying for a test. It's better to study for the test to try to get 100 and you end up getting a 90 than to try to study for a 90 and you end up getting a 77 on the test. Like, put your best foot forward, have the mentality that we're going to go undefeated, we're going to win the national championship, we're going to be the first team that goes 16-0, even if it doesn't happen. But you got to have that mindset. You got to be confident in yourself and in your team that you're going to be successful. So I take nothing away from, I'm not sitting here criticizing Dabo Swinney for sitting here saying we're going to go 16-0, because that's exactly what he should say. He shouldn't say we're going to go 15-1. Who are you going to lose to then if you say we're going to go 15-1? That's what we're wondering.
Now, you referenced they open up the season against LSU, which is not going to be a cakewalk, but I checked the FanDuel odds. Clemson is favored by 3.5 points, and I think they can and probably will win that game. Now, LSU, they're good. They're expected to be very good, but not the best of the best in the SEC. Guys, I can see a world where Clemson runs the table regular season, wins an ACC championship. They start 13-0. What I'm not, though, convinced about, they've got to show this to me, is that they've truly closed the gap with the elites of a top-heavy Big Ten and the top of the SEC. Because, again, like we saw what happened last year. They got trounced by Georgia in the opener. People will say, oh, well, Clemson was a different team by the end of the season, but they still lost to South Carolina in their final regular season game at home, by the way. And then they were convincingly beaten by Texas in the CFP. So I'm not convinced that even if Clemson is good enough to start their season 13-0, what happens if and when you run up against a Georgia, an Ohio State in the college football playoff, in Alabama? Like I have to see it to believe it, that they've gotten to that level where they're better than the best of the best in college football. So that's where I'm at on Clemson.
Dono, I was so excited, when I started this, that yes, Dabo's back. We're getting the guy that we like on the sidelines there, the BYOG, bring your own guts. I'm ready to bring my own guts with Clemson going on a 16-0 run like this. But then to your point, I mean, that's a lot of games, man. And yes, the ACC is down, but what have you done in the big time games? And what we haven't really been able to see yet from Clemson, and Jackson, I'd be curious your thoughts on this as well, is you got to get the quarterback position right. And I think everybody loves Cade Klubnik going into the season, and I do too. However, what have those big game moments looked like for him? Losing in the college football playoff to Texas, I believe, this past year, and then the losses that you mentioned, Dono, to open up the season against Georgia, the loss against South Carolina at home. What is your quarterback, your best player, done in the biggest moments?
Well, they're definitely in a better situation at this time this year than they were last year with Cade Klubnik. Because this year it feels like, okay, Cade, do it again.
Yeah.
We saw what you did last year. You definitely got better over the course of the season and ended up having an all ACC caliber year. Now go out and do it again. And it's easier to prove that you can do it again than to prove that you can do it to begin with. I'm not really worried about Cade Klubnik, to be honest with you, which is a complete 180 from where I was a year ago around this time. And Dono, you mentioned something very interesting, that if Clemson is 13-0, you still might not have like a lot of faith in them versus the top of the Big Ten or the big powers of the SEC. I'm not on board with you on that. I don't know if they're going to be 13-0, but if they are 13-0, and I'm looking at their schedule right now, a win at South Carolina, beating LSU, beating SMU, going on the road and beating Louisville. If they go 13-0 and they're healthy, they're probably one of the 2 or 3 favorites entering the college football playoff easily. In fact, they might enter the college football playoff at 13-0, assuming that it does happen, as the number 1 team in the country. And I don't even think it would be particularly close either at that point. Doesn't mean they'll win. It doesn't mean that your concerns can't come to fruition. But if they're 13-0, they just have to prove that they can actually complete the season and win the national championship. Not can they compete with the big boys. I think you go 13-0, you can compete with anyone.
Well, and when we come back, let's take a look at the ACC. Is it going to be as easy as people think it is for Clemson? Because there are, last I checked, 16 other teams in this conference. So I want to talk about potential sleepers. Also, so a couple of weeks ago, JJ and I and a few others were at ACC Media Days. We got votes for the All-ACC team. Clemson absolutely dominates the All-ACC team. Are they really this much more talented than everyone else? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on the ACC squad. I mentioned those FanDuel odds. Clemson favored 3.5 points against LSU. Even before football season starts, my friends, summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends while your friends, I should say, are getting sunburned at the beach. Folks, we've been using FanDuel to track our favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you for making the ACC Squad your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. All right, so guys, this was the result of the media vote for all ACC team. And there's a lot of Clemson on there. In fact, 11 all ACC selections. I double-checked last year, and the team actually with the most last year was Miami, but with 5. Like, nobody dominated the list the way that Clemson just did. So, JJ, I'll ask you, is Clemson truly this much more talented than every other team in the conference? And if they are, what does that mean for the rest of the ACC?
Donna, you got to love all of the paw prints all over this list, right? It's like you dropped your homework on the floor and your pet walked through the house and left the paw prints there with all the Clemson logos that we're seeing on the screen here. I think in a way it's not that crazy to say there could be this bit of a talent gap between Clemson and their peers in the conference when you simply look at where recruiting has been over the last decade or so within the conference. There are football programs, your school being one of them, Dono, in Miami, who are really trying to change those things and putting in big work on that front. But you think back to all the ACC schools that you see, or excuse me, the SEC schools that you see towards the top of the country. Oftentimes, if there's going to be an outsider, it's a school like Clemson that's there. They are a really, really talented bunch. And so I'm not too surprised at all to see them in a year like this, where you have this many selections for the preseason all ACC team. It's another one of those things where we can point back to Dabo Swinney's comments and say, okay, you should then have a little bit more confidence in your team going into the upcoming season if this is what your roster looks like compared to the rest of the league.
I think what it tells me is that if this is true and Clemson really has half of the first team all ACC, because keep in mind, this is one team. This is not first, second, third team. One team here that they do preseason poll, and they got 11. That's half.
That's one side of the field.
They shouldn't lose a conference game if this is the case. And none of the conference games should be particularly close. That's what the graphic tells you. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's hard to go an entire year, even in the ACC, where you have no stumbles whatsoever, no margin for error, no, what was that game? Or going on the road against a good team and you just kind of fall flat. None of that. We're not sitting here saying that Clemson's going to lose to, I don't know, they're going to lose to Florida State at home. That's not what we're saying. But you're telling me they're a lock to go into Georgia Tech and win? You're telling me they're a lock to beat SMU at home or to go on the road and beat Louisville? The graphic says they should go undefeated in the conference. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. I'd probably just be conservative and say 7-1 in the conference. But yeah, they're the favorites for a reason. They got a lot of talented players.
And they are a legit talented team. Starting with Klubnik at quarterback, they've got best looking receiver core in the ACC and one of the best in the country. Best looking defensive line in the conference, one of the best in the country. Some Clemson fans were mad at me late last week on Locked On ACC. I brought this up, and it's like, I'm not saying your team isn't good. Like, I'm saying there might have been some lazy voting to just put this many Clemson players in. And I'm also saying if you're really that much more talented than everyone else, I know Rhett Lashley a couple weeks ago, the SMU coach, was calling the SEC top heavy. Well, Rhett, if you look at this graphic, they're telling you the ACC is top heavy, if you want to believe this. And on that note, on top heavy or not, go ahead, JJ.
No, that's just so true. When you think about, your best team is taking up all of these spots. Seems a little top heavy to me, but you go back through, and I don't have the number in front of me, but Donna, we're looking at the all ACC ballots here. And it was like 173 or 183 people cast ballots to make up a list like that. That is a large sample size of people that have paw prints everywhere, man.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, okay. So if it's not the paw prints, and Jackson, I'll start with you on this. Let's talk about sleepers. And no, like, we would not consider Miami or Louisville or SMU to be sleeper possibly. We got to go a little deeper than that. But is there a sleeper team you look at that has a legit shot, you think, to shock the world and win this conference?
So, quick backstory on this. My two sleepers, like a month and a half ago, were Georgia Tech and Duke, because I thought, these are pretty good teams. I'm curious to where they're going to be ranked in the preseason poll. And it turns out they get a lot of respect. So no, they're no longer sleepers in my opinion. I just think that they're just going to be good teams. They could win the conference, sure, if you want to say they're a sleeper to win the conference, but are they really that much of a sleeper if they're ranked inside the top 6 of the ACC? Probably not. I think you got to be trying to find those teams that are boom or bust. And so I was bringing it up pre-show. Nobody has a clue what North Carolina is going to be. Nobody. Do you know how it's going to be?
I don't think Bill Belichick knows.
Nobody knows what the heck is going to happen with North Carolina. Well, to me, that's a perfect sleeper. Because, look, they could be terrible. They could go 3-9 or 4-8. But you can also see a realm where, Bill Belichick, he can coach. Maybe it's different in college, but he can coach. He knows football, obviously, better than pretty much every other coach to ever exist. He knows the game quite well. Maybe they hit on Gio Lopez. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. That's the point, is that we don't know about North Carolina. And when you don't know about a team, it makes them the perfect sleeper candidate. So North Carolina is that type of team I look at and say, they can win 3 games. They can win 10 games. That's a sleeper.
So hold on. But you said another one pre-show. I'll give you the opportunity to tee it up that I feel is still a sleeper and has a more realistic shot in my mind than UNC.
Virginia Tech? Is that what you're referring to?
Listen,
Virginia Tech is ranked where? 11th in the poll. And the reason why they're 11 is because a Virginia Tech fan must have snuck in there and voted them as a first place team. Was that you? Was that you too?
They did.
Vote.
Did you guys vote? Do you guys know who voted for Virginia Tech to finish first?
I don't know. There were a few Virginia Tech outlets there. Wasn't me. It wasn't. I don't think it was JJ either. The fighting gobbler, I think, was out there. They might have voted.
Someone is a big Virginia Tech fan that voted Virginia Tech to finish first in the conference. I mean, that's just. I mean, you should not be voting if you're going to vote with that type of bias. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, they're kind of a sleeper. I mean, is Kyron Drones ever going to be Kyron Drones like we think he can be? Because a lot of people were high on Virginia Tech last year and they kind of let us down. See, that's another type of sleeper candidate. It's either the teams that you don't know, or it's the teams where you're like, you had high expectations last year, didn't live up to them. Now we're kind of lower on you this year. There's room for improvement. So could Virginia Tech all of a sudden just say, we're going to win 9 games? It happens almost every year where there's some team or teams in the conference that just kind of come out of nowhere.
There was one year when it was Wake Forest, like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. JJ, I can speak for Syracuse fans. They were definitely optimistic about 9-3 last year for sure. But JJ, did Duke fans think that they were going to go 9-3 last year?
No.
It just happens. A team comes out of nowhere sometimes. And I think it's North Carolina and Virginia Tech are 2 teams I look at and say, I don't really know what you're going to be. And if I don't know what you're going to be, I think we're sleeping on you a little bit. Maybe we should take a deeper look into them.
A project I'm excited that we're able to have in conversations like this in a world sans divisions, right? In the ACC, we're not dividing this thing up coastal and Atlantic. We really are going 1-17, laying these schools out. So it'll be a little bit easier at the end of the year to say, okay, who was the biggest riser? Who fell the most? And to me, I think that could be where we see who falls into that sleeper category. And maybe to Jackson's point at the top, we were just a month too early to think of a school like Georgia Tech and Duke, and they're the ones that, yeah, they climb up 5 spots, and that's a big jump, but it's up to number 1, right? That I could see that as something that possibly happens.
So Georgia Tech, for example, right? Everyone loves Georgia Tech because they were everyone's sleeper team a month ago, and then all of a sudden everyone caught wind of it. So now you're no longer a sleeper. And then it causes the opposite reaction. I say, okay, Georgia Tech, how good is Georgia Tech? Now everyone's on the Georgia Tech bandwagon. Now they're 4th in the poll.
Yeah, that was surprising. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I guess we're buying into Georgia Tech. But I look at that and I say, okay, well, now you're just a prime underachieving candidate because you were a team. I was like, I'm expecting you to be like middle of the pack in the poll. And then all of a sudden you rise into the top 5. And now you're saying, what? 4th? That's kind of where I would have them, but that's an underachieving candidate in my opinion.
Well, when we come back, talking about achieving, underachieving, the first coaches poll is out, and folks are raising some questions about this. Let's talk about the 3 ACC teams that they did rank. They left anybody out. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of The Squad. Thanks for making us your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out the portal. Our good friend and host of Locked On Seminoles, Brian Smith, also hosts the portal, where he talks basically all those new things that the old timers hate about college sports, NIL, transfer portal. He keeps up very well with recruiting as well. The portal is available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, guys. So let me pull up the first coaches poll of the season that just came out this week. You see some ACC representation there. Clemson comes in at number 6. Miami comes in at number 10. It's a little higher than I expected. SMU at number 16. Those are your 3 ACC teams. You know, JJ, I feel like a couple teams in the ACC were possibly left out on this one. If you look, you'll notice the Big 12 actually got more teams in overall, not as high, but they got, I think, 4 teams into the ACC's 3.
Yeah, no, overall, certainly, but I'm excited for the ACC perspective to have 2 of them in the top 10 itself. A summer in which, and really a news cycle over the last 2 or 3 years, in which the SEC and Big Ten has dominated every single conversation that we've had. To have 2 teams from the ACC end up towards the driver's seat inside the top 10 with Clemson, with Miami, gives me hope for what this conference as a whole can do this season.
And let me real quick run this down for the audio listeners who aren't looking at the graphic. In the top 5, you've got Texas at number 1. Man, Arch Manning, you better be as good as everyone thinks you're going to be. Ohio State, the defending champs, 2nd. Penn State, 3rd. Georgia, Notre Dame rounding out the top 5. Then Clemson, Oregon at 7. Alabama, LSU, Miami rounding out the top 10. Arizona State, Illinois, South Carolina, Michigan, Ole Miss, then SMU at 16, Florida 17, Tennessee 18, Indiana 19, Kansas State 20, then Texas A&M, Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, and Boise State round out that top 25. What do you think, Jackson, on the ACC perspective?
I think it's a little light, but they're ranked pretty highly, which is nice. They're getting of the teams that are ranked, they're certainly getting respect. I think the only people that would be mad about Clemson being 6 are Clemson fans. That is okay. Miami at 10 is a little bit surprising. I don't think they're a top 10 team in the country, but you know what? The coaches are saying they're a top 10 team in the country, and coaches probably know more than I know. So you know what? They're a top 10 team in the country. And Dono, I don't think it's because they're trying to boost up Miami for TV ratings only to get smacked by Notre Dame, because as you've pointed out, this is the coaches poll, not the AP poll. There is no reason for the coaches to sit there and say, let's boost up Miami for the TV ratings against Notre Dame. They don't care. So they must think that Miami is really good, and SMU at 16 is about where I thought they would be. So getting those 3 teams where they're at is good, but it's only 3 teams. And you can make an argument that Louisville should be in the top 25. The issue with Louisville and I feel like we say this all the time about them, is what is their true upside? So like we can rank them in the top 25. Cool. But are they going to be more than that? Is Louisville a team that you look at and say they can make a college football playoff? Louisville fans are probably going to come at me and say, yes, they're absolutely a team that can make the college football playoff. But what is their upside? And I think that's ultimately what hurts certain teams in these polls is you look at the upside in the preseason. Oh, this team could be really good, so we're going to rank them at 17th or whatever in the country, right? Even though their floor could be 4 wins, missing a bowl, terrible, well underachieving. And then you have a team like Louisville that slides in week 4 consistently in the top 25 every week, but you know that they're not going to ever really be much higher than that. So it's a preseason poll. I think they do matter, but it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, I mean, preseason polls, like they do matter. I wish they didn't exist, if I'm being quite honest. And like part of it, I look at it from a Miami perspective. Like Miami has a recent history of underachieving based on the preseason polls. So I get annoyed that they even get put in that position because, like you mentioned, hey, it feels like Miami maybe in the top 10 is a little bit too high. Like my prediction before this one came out was I think Miami's probably going to be in the 12 to 13 range, which is not that much lower, but it's not top 10. So now Miami's in this position where they lose to Notre Dame week 1, which obviously could happen. Then people will say, well, were they really a top 10 team in the first place? I just wish, and I understand why this doesn't happen because, people love to have conversations. And even if, like Jackson mentioned, the coaches who vote on this do not directly profit, so they have no reason to manipulate it. But this is great for television. It's great for what we're doing right now on the Locked On Network. It's great for all the publications out there that cover college sports. It's like to put out a preseason poll when we're not really going to know who these teams are until a few weeks into the season anyway. It drives me crazy because you put teams either, you rank them too high or teams that are unranked because, hey, for a team like Louisville, I do think there is some upside depending on how much Brian Brom can get out of Miller Moss, who's obviously very talented. He's had his ups and downs. Brom seems to be this quarterback whisperer who somehow got Tyler Shuck drafted, which I think is a miracle based on how he looked in the combine. I think Louisville's got, one of the better on paper running games in the country. They've got some pieces on their defense. They did lose some from last year. They underachieved a little bit last year. But I think if Miller Moss can actually show out, I think they have an opportunity. And so, with them being outside of the preseason ranking, they're just going to have to work that much harder to change that perception and get in to the ranking. That's why I hate preseason rankings.
Go ahead, Jackson. Okay. Here's the thing though with preseason rankings. They're like power rankings. That's what they are. They're power rankings, what you would do in pro sports. In pro sports, though, we don't really care about power rankings, or at least I don't care about power rankings because there's actual standings that will determine what happens, right? There's no, I think the Minnesota Vikings are better than the Green Bay Packers, so I'm going to rank them 2, and this team's going to be 3. No, it's who's got the better record, and if they have the same record, there are tiebreakers involved to break the tie, and the regular season standings tells you who's going to be in the playoff and who the best teams are in the playoff. And then you have a playoff to decide who's the best team out of all the playoff teams, right? College football, the issue is you really don't have that. Yes, you've got some automatic bids, right? You win your conference, which is determined based on merit, right? If you win your conference, you win your conference games, you go to the conference championship, you get your tiebreakers, all of that fun stuff. But aside from 5 guaranteed spots, there are 7 that are up for grabs. You kind of need this. You kind of need a preseason poll because without it, you're kind of sitting here and you're kind of sorting through all these teams. How do you sort through the teams? See, yeah, it doesn't end up being how it ends at the end of the day and when the season's played. It's just a preseason poll. But you know what? You kind of need them. I don't think that they should just go away. You kind of need it to create interest in the sport as well. Because otherwise we're sitting here saying, okay, so South Carolina is playing this team. Are these teams good? I have no idea. There's no ranking. there's no standings to sit here and tell me that they're good. And everyone's playing in different conferences anyway.
Yeah.
You need to have something. So if it's a preseason power ranking, I'm fine with it. Plus, we know this at the end of the day that the college football playoff committee doesn't vote until later in the season.
Yeah.
And it's not directly tied with the AP or the coaches poll. So it's just something. Yeah, it's our perception and they do matter, of course, but I don't have a problem with preseason polls. I think they're pretty much needed in this sport.
And my last thought to add to your point there, Jackson, is that, you look at week 1, you've got 3 top 10 matchups that have built in front of your eyes, right? Like the first game of the season is number 1 Texas versus number 2 Ohio State. That was already going to be theater. And now you add in, it's the 2 best teams in the country. Super exciting there on that front to see that play out. Also for just college football junkies, I found it interesting that Texas has never been preseason number 1 in the coaches or AP poll. It's never happened.
I did not know that.
This is the first time that has happened for Texas. And so we'll see if they can follow suit with the AP poll. I'm fairly certain of that. And then we'll have the top 10 matchups like you talked about with Clemson and LSU. And then you've also got Miami and Notre Dame.
You are correct.
It's never, I can't
you
believe
are correct.
The
college
hype,
reference.
Yeah. The
They're
hype with Arch Manning is crazy going into the season. With this Texas team is crazy going into the year. And we've never seen anything like it out of that Longhorns program.
5 times they've been ranked second in the, 5 times they've been ranked second in the preseason poll. Never been number 1.
I'll be curious to see if the AP does it the same way or if they maybe flip the top 2. Well, we certainly appreciate all of you making the Locked On ACC Squad your first listen and your first watch. Make sure you check out our other shows. I host Locked On Canes, talking all things Miami, also Locked On ACC. Jackson hosts Locked On Syracuse. JJ hosts Locked On Blue Devils. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to all of our channels. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of The Squad right here on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.